Hi, my name is Ashley Scipioni, and I'm the Vice President, Assistant District Manager for Fidelity National Title, East Florida. I've been in the industry since I was 16. I've seen nearly all facets of the business, and I work to find and improve operations to ensure everyone is operating as efficiently and effectively as possible. Now, I'm sharing my 20+ years of experience with you through this virtual course. Today, we're going to be talking about title insurance and answering some key questions. What is it? Why is it important? What are the two different kinds of policies, and how do we do it? Then we'll cover some industry terminology and my top 10 reasons for why you should want title insurance. Whether you're new to real estate or an industry veteran, this class will help you understand how title insurance works and how it fits into the real estate process. Let's dive in. So, what is title insurance? In layman's terms, title insurance is the one protection you have from something unknown. The closest equivalent I can come up with is Carfax. You're going to buy a used car, you want to know the history, has it been any major accidents, who owned it previously, was it up in that snow? And you're going to get that Carfax report to tell you that so you feel confident in moving forward. That's what title insurance does for you. At the end of the day, the seller just wants to make their money. The buyer is the one that needs assurances that nobody's going to come knocking later. If you're going to buy a piece of property, you need to know someone isn't going to chase you down, say, I own this property, you don't. Without this piece of paper, you might need to hire lawyers while possibly facing foreclosure. We are the people you call to defend your title in the case of fraud. Why is title insurance so important? I think the best way to describe the importance is to give a real life story. So at Fidelity, we had a transaction, it closed, happy buyer, happy seller. The buyer moves into the property and quickly renovates that old kitchen. A couple months later, they get a knock on their door. Turns out those snowbirds finally came home and wanted to know why those strangers were in their house and why their kitchen looked so much better. Turns out the sellers were imposters. So while we had fully executed documents and we had what we thought were valid passports, the transaction was fraudulent, and so they called Fidelity. With that owner's title policy, we were responsible for making it right. So we reimbursed the buyer their full purchase price as well as the cost of that new kitchen. If not for us, the buyer would have been out hundreds of thousands of dollars with nowhere to turn. I'm going to go into the definition of title insurance and describe the two different types of policies. So title insurance really is your policy of protection against loss and hidden hazards that could compromise your ownership. We have two different policies that we issue. We issue an owner's title insurance policy as well as a lender's title insurance policy. So the owner's policy is simple. It's kind of the story I just described. It ensures the new buyer that there's no previous issues in the chain of title, no liens or mortgages against the prior owner that are going to come back to haunt them. It's going to give them somewhere to turn when something goes wrong down the road. The lender's title insurance ensures the lender, so the new lender, that they're in first lien position. That means as a title company, we're clearing all previous mortgages, all previous liens of record. That way, if the new buyer defaults and the mortgage lender has to foreclose, they've got some assurance that they're in first lien position and can recoup those funds. So there are two policies that we issue. Again, the owner's policy and the lender's title insurance policy. How do we do it? So I'm going to give you an overview of what it takes to get you from your offer to that final title policy. So once you sign a contract, the seller accepts, it gets sent over to us and we search official records. So official records are basically an index of all the recorded documents in the history of the chain of title. So we cross-reference names, legal descriptions, see what we can potentially dig up on the property or to the current owners that we may need to clear to ensure the lender, again, that they're in first lien position and that the new owner, there's no issues they're going to run into. So we use those results to formulate our title commitment. That's kind of our map that lets us know what we need to do to issue those final title policies. So it's going to include things like ordering payoffs or HOA estoppels, or perhaps just requesting documentation that would affect the chain of title. We're going to get all of that information and check off our worksheet. Once it's done, then we're clear to close, and then we can ensure you as the new buyer or your lender that the property is free and clear. Sounds simple, but I promise you it's much more complicated than that. So industry terminology. Maybe this is your first time in the industry, maybe you're not familiar with these terms, so I just want to touch on a few of them. A contract. A contract is the agreement you have between the buyer and the seller agreeing to the terms of the purchase. So that's the purchase price, deposits, inspection periods, who's paying for what. It's an overview that binds the purchase together, and it's actually what we use to start our process. A survey. You might not know what a survey is, or you might not have seen one, but a survey gives you an overview. It's kind of like a map. It shows you the property. It shows you where your boundary lines are, where the fence is, if that neighbor's encroaching onto your property just a little bit. It gives you a full view of what you're purchasing, and it's actually very important. It is required on lenders' files, so if you're getting a loan policy, if you're getting new finance, you do have to get a survey. On cash transactions, the survey is optional, but I would highly suggest that all buyers obtain a survey so you know what you're purchasing. Payoffs. Some people that come over to the US, they're not familiar with the payoff. They don't understand that we're selling a home that we have a debt against. But here, we might have a mortgage out there with a balance, and we're ready to sell. The market's hot, we want to get out. We're going to order a formal statement from your lender that tells us exactly how much to pay and where to send those funds. That helps us ensure that that lien is released from the property for that new owner. A homeowners association. I'm sure you all know what those are. Probably not positive thoughts there. However, for an association as it pertains to closing, we do have to get what we call an estoppel. And that's essentially just a report that tells us what the monthly dues are, if there's any extra fees that need to be collected at closing. It also confirms if there's any violations or issues with the property that should be remedied prior to closing. Obviously, that's all in full disclosure to the new buyer. All right, title commitment. I touched on that before. Our title commitment is kind of our roadmap to get to closing, but it actually has two sections. It has a whole section for requirements that tells us what we need to do to clear title, and then exceptions. So those are items that we cannot clear. Those would be restrictions or covenants filed by maybe a local municipality, the association, things that are going to maintain and govern the property for the life of the property, so they're not released. A municipal lien search. Many people don't understand what that is, and I know I just keep using the word search, but a municipal lien search is a report that gives you all of those things that are unrecorded. So that's going to be utility balances, code violations, permitting. None of that actually affects our ability to insure. Most of it's actually not even covered by insurance. But these are items, again, in an attempt to full disclosure to let you know if there's any surprises around the corner. Title issues and clearance. So when we talk about clearing title, again, we're just clearing all of those items listed. Order to pay off, super simple, but perhaps someone in the transaction's deceased. We may need to obtain court records, from the probate case, or potentially there might be an ongoing court case that needs to be finalized before we can actually say that we have clear title. Photo IDs. Just so you know, you do need identification when you're purchasing and selling a home. So that would include a valid driver's license, passport. If you've got neither of those, you could get an identification card from the state. Anything else out of that, I'd probably contact your closer to make sure it's valid. There's not a long list there, but you will need that for closing. And then closing funds. Those are the funds that you're going to send in when the transaction is being finalized. That is the funds you're using to purchase the property. And you should know that there's only a couple of methods where you can actually do that. So most often it's a wire transfer. So you go to your bank and you initiate a transfer of funds to the title company. Some people don't want to send a wire transfer. They're just uncomfortable with it. So in those situations, they do want to get cashier's checks. Again, you'd go into the bank, you'd get that from your bank. But again, you would need to bring it to the title company ahead of closing because they're not considered same-day funds. So top 10 reasons for title insurance. So if I haven't scared you yet with my story, I just want to go over some reasons because people often think, why do I need it? And I'm telling you, there's a long list, but the first 10, forgery. How do you know that a husband and wife who sold the property, what if one spouse forged the other's signature? Who are you going to call if that happens? Fraudulently executed documents. This would be an imposter. So it's actually exactly what my story was talking about. Somebody executes the documents that had no legal right to do so. And now all your money is gone. Who are you going to call? Undue influence on a seller. So in Florida, we see this a lot. Elderly abuse. Is there someone in the transaction that's maybe forcing their elderly parent, grandparent to sign documents? Does that grandparent even understand what they're doing? And unfortunately, it's sad, but it's true. But it's something that title insurance covers. So imposters. So if there's someone that is pretending to be the seller, so they have a valid ID that matches up, they've got all this documentation showing that they are the legal owner, but at the end of the day, they're not. Again, something covered by title insurance. Incorrect marital status. I cannot tell you how often a seller comes to closing, states they're single, and the truth is their divorce isn't final. They're just thinking about being single. Or perhaps they're just separated and trying to offload some assets before their divorce begins. Either way, in Florida, we have homestead laws that protect the spouse. So if it is a primary residence, spousal joinder is required. And so if that wife shows up claiming interest in that property at a later date, you'll be able to file a claim under your title policy. Legal description errors. So perhaps just a clerical error in the legal description. Perhaps too much property or too little property was conveyed. Perhaps you thought you were buying 2 parcels of land, but in the legal it was only 1. Those kind of issues that come up later, you're going to come back to Fidelity to make it right. Missed liens or mortgages. Like I said, we comb through official records, finding everything we can that attaches to the property or to the seller's name, anything that we need to satisfy. But perhaps the clerk misindexed it. Perhaps the clerk did a typo in the name or didn't include that legal description. That's an unknown error that will pop up later and is covered by title insurance. Unrecorded documents. Perhaps your documents were sent UPS to the clerk and they never made it there. And now you're struggling to prove that you own the home, and you could file a claim against your policy to make that right. Mental incapacity. You don't know what state of mind the seller is in. Whether they're young or old, they might have a guardianship or something that prevents them from executing documents legally. And if that's the case and it comes about later, you'll know who to call. Undisclosed heirs. Like I mentioned before, if someone in the chain of title potentially is deceased, there may be other interests that we need to eliminate before we insure. So perhaps there's a married couple, the husband passes away, the wife claims that she owns everything, but it's actually the stepmom. And one day those children show up wanting to know where their assets are from the estate. That's something covered by title insurance. Title insurance isn't just a check-the-box item in the real estate process. If done well and done correctly, it can save you, your customer, the buyer, the seller, lots of stress in the long run. For more expert real estate knowledge, follow The Reframe on social media and check out our website, thereframefnt.com.